Thanks for the work that you've been doing in Unit 7. I'd like to take a little bit of time to go through Week 7 with you and to talk about some of your posts. Also, I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about the midterm. I know that many of you felt a little pressured by the midterm and you felt like you did not perform as well as you could have performed. Um, so for that purpose, I am going to go ahead and offer extra credit. For extra credit, what I would like you to do is I would like you to either do a PowerPoint presentation of at least 5 to 10 slides on one of the readings from the class, or I would like you to do a 1 to 3 minute recording, either screen capture or a YouTube video of you talking about an aspect of the literature. And this extra credit will be good for a grade bump, which means if you're at a C minus, it'll bump you to a C. If you're at a C plus, it'll bump you to a B minus. If you're at a B minus, it'll bump you to a B. And you can also use this for not just for the midterm, but if you just want to do extra credit, you can do that too. So just to let you know, that is the extra credit, and you have until the end of the class to submit it. As far as kind of the work that you're doing in Week 7, I will say that I can see that you are definitely, thinking more about the literature and kind of engaging it. I see that particularly in Priscilla's, who has come to this idea that poem being interesting to read was, of course, the simplification. And I think that there's been some very good interaction with Priscilla from Ryan and, of course, from Chandra. I appreciate those observations because that is really what this class is about making those connections, guiding the people and the readers to see and to understand what you wanted to talk about. I also really appreciate, of course, Dina did a great job. I really like to point out that Kristen's observations, in particular, about, well, of course, tumor, which is its own interesting, but the Gilded Six Bits is one of my favorites. I also like the Harlem Dancer. I think this is a great reading and a great engagement of the text. I think that this Kristen's brought up some great points that Priscilla and Clyde also connected to. And of course, James pulled in this idea of Dos Passos. So I appreciate those kind of connections because I do see that that's what you guys need to be pulling into the final. And of course, kind of taking with you as you exit this class is this sense of what literature has brought to you and what you can bring to the study of the world because of what you've been watching and seeing and interacting. I really appreciated Clyde's observations in relation to the dealing with Ginsberg's Howl. This idea of the beat poets, is a very different perspective than what we might see and use, although it is still picking up on some of the ideas that we've read about in poetry. The idea of loss, the idea of insanity, the idea of rebellion is something that is key, and I appreciate those observations. Also, as John pointed out, Clyde's presentation, it really does capture in good form main ideas, evidence, analysis, and of course links back to our overall lesson, which we've been talking about throughout the course. And with this being week 8, you really should have a good, strong sense of what you want to explore as we are moving forward. I appreciated Scott's observations and the interaction actions, in particular because of the reading of Sylvia Plath's. This is a good engagement of the text, and I think that also bringing in, Lowell and the others, I think really does focus the reader on this idea, as Clyde mentioned, of kind of seeing this injustice and this disconnect and using poetry to speak against it and to speak for the quiet or the silent. And those are some interesting observations that kind of run concurrent with the idea of the Harlem Renaissance Depression literature and the poetry that comes from beyond. I appreciated that from Scott. I can see specifically in Brittany's observations that there was a sense of focus on the idea of the Gilded Sixpence and Zora Neale Hurston. And Hurston was one of the voices that really hasn't got a lot of credit for the contributions to literature. She's got a lot of credit for being a predominant, figure in the Harlem Renaissance, but she really does write in such a strong and engaged manner that it connects not just thematically, but it connects spiritually, and it also connects directly with the reader through the plot and character development. I like that that was pointed out because this is an important text to kind of continue to build on, and so I appreciated that. Curtis's observations in particular allowed us to kind of focus on Claude McKay's The Harlem Dancer and reading it instead of as a poem, but really thinking about this kind of imagistic perspective, this kind of being with or in some way. And this idea of gender and pride that also underpins or undergirds the Harlem Renaissance, that gender, femininity is something to be celebrated and to be owned and to be proud of just as much as color, just as much as class, anything along those lines. And that is a key development in this period. I appreciate Robert's observations in particular in relation to um, the Harlem Dancer and, of course, the Gilded Six-Bits. I like that the idea is that he puts himself in to the text, which is a good thing. And remember, that's one of the responses to reading is that you can think about how it affects you as the reader, as well as you can think of how it captures culture or captures the time period. I do appreciate Troy's observations, the idea that Harlem Renaissance bringing this kind of postmodern era about and kind of it being the breeding ground for it, and I would definitely agree with that. And I like the pairing of Hughes and Ginsberg, that this idea that equality, this idea of free will, this idea of expression is key. And I think that might have got lost when you were kind of going through and just looking at each unit as this discrete historical period without overlap. And there's a lot of overlap, and I think that those are points that you want to keep in your mind. I appreciate Brittany's observations about Hal. Hal is one of the more particular poems. It really does capture a mindset, the cultural issues, capitalism, nationalism, the mainstream government wars, etc., etc. And I love that Brittany at the end is exacerbated by zombie novels or vampire romance novels. Um, this idea of the collapse of culture is something that is also being reacted against in these works. And it's not being snobbish. I don't want anyone to think it's like these poets are being like, oh my God, the middle class, or oh my God, these certain individuals are just not, the Philistines are just not as cultured as we are. They're saying no, they deserve this culture. Everyone deserves it, and everyone should be angry about this kind of almost dumbing down, or this kind of, as the vampire metaphor goes, the sucking of the good stuff out. And that it's not so much I guess you'd say, an issue of one being intellectually elite or not. It's really kind of this idea that Americans need to react and definitely need to see with this idea. Um, and I like the interaction too, in that both Shannon and Troy speak about the idea that Brittany's presentation has kind of sparked with them an idea that this does need to be addressed and that this is definitely something important. I appreciated Kelly Campbell's observations about the fish. This is a poem. Elizabeth Bishop is one of our predominant or preeminent feminine poets, a confessional poet in the tradition of Plath and Lowell. And they were all kind of buddies and friends, but she has a different way of writing about the interior landscape of herself that doesn't make it about what she feels or thinks, but instead about what she's watching and being exposed to. And so I definitely think that Kelly's observations about the fish were important. I appreciated Shannon's observations about the poem and about the thematic readings. I like that these are engaged and that, as Lorenzo mentions, the focus on the imagery is clear, but at the same time an expression excuse me, does occur in the work. And that, that remember that even though we're speaking about art and we're speaking about ideas, we are still speaking about art. We're still speaking about expression. I appreciated Richard's observations about The Negro Speaks of Rivers, because this really does capture both the geography of the blues with the Deep South, but it also kind of really does focus on the idea of movement and of being a kind of freedom and developed, as is mentioned in Richard's post. I think that that idea of movement, that idea of development, is something that we kind of take for granted in our works and poetry of this period and this contemporary period we're living in. But it definitely is something that needs to be. It started somewhere, and in many ways, it started with these works. Um, I appreciated Leisha's confirmation about this kind of gilded six bits. It's a story of love, betrayal, and forgiveness, and that there is a moral, and it does have a plot, and it does kind of focus. The idea that there isn't just it's not just art for art's sake, but it does have a sense of being didactic. It's teaching, but also a sense of morality. I can see also in Rachel's observations that she too speaks of this kind of strong message, this kind of teaching, this didacticism, and involving, also this entertaining portion too, and kind of thinking about Skunk Hour from Lowell and also from Plath too, and it being powerful, powerful images, but also powerful commentary on our culture. And that's really what we're looking at as we shift into week 8, is a lot of the works you're going to be reading are making commentary on what's going on in our experiences and our culture. Um, Terry really does kind of capture a sense of both the joy of this reading, but also kind of the idea that sexuality, the idea, this opinion, the idea of different metaphors, this relationships, these idea that personal relationships and personal viewpoints do often represent the collective, and this is a great way to kind of think about as we exit week 7 and go into week 8, that these works, yes, while they're very highly personalized and very much related to a specific experience, they're also speaking to the holistic, to the culture at large. And I think you are all seeing this. Now, week 8 is fiction in the 50s. This is kind of what we would say is the idea of postmodernism or contemporary. And so you will have a little overview that kind of discusses what's going on and what you want to be exploring. Our last posting is going to be, of course, week 9, which is the 60s and postmodernity and postcolonialism. So we only have this week, next week, and the following week. And week 10 will be the final. The final is not proctored. The final is very similar to the midterm, but instead we will be talking a little bit about some of the differences to that as we continue forward. If you do have any questions, please feel free to contact me. I appreciate the work that you're doing in the class, and I look forward to seeing more of your work. Thanks so much.